Welcome, dear literature enthusiasts, to another journey where we marry the adrenaline of action cinema with the deep currents of critical thought. If you cherish films that thrill the senses and challenge the mind, consider liking this video and subscribing for more explorations that blend textual analysis with cinematic storytelling. Before we dive in, a quick note. What follows is not a conventional film review, but a theoretical, intellectual, and critical analysis designed for those of us steeped in the craft of literature. We're here to uncover narrative structures, thematic undercurrents, and the poetic rhythms lurking beneath the roar of engines and the echo of gunfire. I'll never forget the first time I encountered that 2003 adrenaline-fueled saga. I was holed up in a friend's basement, the winter wind rattling the windows, and we pressed play on a scratched DVD whose cover boasted high-speed chases and martial arts mastery. As the opening credits rolled, the grime and neon of urban sprawl unfurled before me, and I felt that familiar pulse of excitement, like stumbling into a poem whose meter you only half grasp but whose power you feel in every beat. That night I scribbled fervent notes in the dim glow of a desk lamp, struck by how two seemingly disparate stars, one a veteran of Hong Kong's balletic fight choreography, the other a Harlem-raised rapper with a granite jaw, could blend their talents into a singular kinetic harmony. This story catapults us into a world where loyalty and betrayal lock horns in the concrete canyons of Los Angeles. At its heart are two men bound by very different codes. One, a master thief whose greatest heist is swiping a cache of black market diamonds for the sake of his ill daughter's medical bills. The other, an undercover government agent whose quest for justice demands he walk the razor's edge between right and wrong. From the moment their worlds collide in a labyrinth of warehouses and high-speed pursuits, the film careens like a runaway train, each car bearing a fresh collision of philosophy, honor, and raw human need. I've always been drawn to stories of unlikely alliances, and here that classic trope beats with a peculiar resonance. On one side stands the articulate thief, whose every move speaks of survival honed by necessity. On the other, the by-the-book agent, whose conscience is both compass and cage. Watching them circle and spar felt like witnessing two protagonists in a modern epic poem, each testing the other's mettle. I thought of times in my own life when I encountered those moments of mutual distrust turned respect, when the person I least expected became my greatest ally because circumstance forced us into a shared struggle. Beyond the central duo, the film unfolds a tapestry of motives and manipulations. There's the mafia boss whose velvet glove conceals iron will, the crooked federal official who treats power as a personal playground, and a host of side characters, loyal lieutenants and double-crossers, each contributing a verse to this action-packed ballad. It reminded me of the intricacy of ensemble dramas I've studied, where every character's decision ripples outward, pulling the plot's currents in new directions. By the time the supporting cast revealed their true colors, I was scribbling parallels to crime fiction's great moral conundrums. Who are we when stripped of pretenses, and how far will we go to protect our own? And then there's the orchestrated chaos of its set pieces, the gleaming shafts of neon slicing through midnight streets, the staccato percussion of gunfire, punctuated by the poet's pause of silence before impact, the balletic flow of martial arts sequences where each kick and punch carries narrative weight. Those moments hark back to the rhythmic tension of a well-crafted stanza, where the placement of a single line break can transform meaning. Here, a carefully timed stunt becomes not mere spectacle, but a punctuation mark in the film's argument. Every action speaks to the themes of honor, sacrifice, and the redemptive power of trust. I remember my own pulse racing during a climactic rooftop chase, tires screeching as the cars teetered on the edge of oblivion, bodies tumbling through shards of broken glass, and feeling that rare junction where film transcends entertainment to become an embodied experience. I recalled a childhood notebook filled with half-formed poems about escape and confrontation, lines about leaping beyond fear into the unknown. In those minutes, I understood how cinema can tap into our most visceral memories, resurrecting the mixture of terror and exhilaration that once drove us to scribble in margins with urgent hearts. Beyond its heart-pounding set pieces, the story pulses with quieter currents. There's the scene where the two lades, bloodied and bruised, share a cigarette's fragile warmth in a darkened alley, words sparse but heavy with unspoken understanding. I've always believed that in great narratives, silence can carry more power than dialogue, and here that hush invites us into the characters' inner landscapes. It made me think of the quiet spaces in my favorite novels, those moments where the prose pauses just long enough for the reader's own thoughts to fill the void, forging a bond between page and soul. The film's thematic architecture centers on the tension between duty and compassion. One man's mission demands he treat everyone as potential threats, the other's desperation drives him to risk everything for love. Their uneasy partnership raises questions I often encounter in literature and in life's own narratives. Can we uphold our moral codes when they conflict with our deepest loyalties? What cost must we pay for survival, and can we ever repair the damage wrought by our own desperate acts? These questions echo like leitmotifs throughout the film, resonating in every echo of gunfire and every flash of broken truck glass. Key plot twists emerge like sudden crescendos in a symphony. When the genuine thieves betray one another, leaving the protagonists stranded in a sunken vault of stolen gemstones, I felt that pang of betrayal mirrored in my own friendships gone awry, moments when trust, once broken, reweaves itself only through extraordinary acts of courage. And when the federal agent discovers his own superiors pulled strings to turn him into a pawn, I was reminded of stories of institutional betrayal I've studied in historical texts, how systems designed to protect can be co-opted by darker impulses. Yet the film never tips wholly into cynicism. In its final act, the two heroes, exhausted, battered, but unbowed, deliver a silent nod to one another before confronting the real villain in a showdown that sparks not only in gunfire, but in a clash of ideologies. In that moment, I felt the full power of their journey, that redemption is not handed down by fate but carved through choice, that trust can bloom even in the soil of betrayal, and that companionship can transcend the boundaries of creed and circumstance. I thought of the friendships I've forged across unlikely divides, the bonds deepened not by shared backgrounds but by shared trials. As the dust settles and the credits roll, the neon glow fades into the hush of reflection. We've raced along highways that curve toward oblivion, traced the arcs of bullets that split the night, and glimpsed the fragile humanity beneath the surface of every hardened exterior. We've interrogated the film's underlying themes, connected its characters to the archetypal figures of literature's rich tapestry, and teased out the narrative's poetic rhythms hidden beneath its high-octane stylings. And so, dear friends, I invite you to linger a moment in that reverent silence before we part. If this exploration has sparked your curiosity, if you thirst for more journeys into film's hidden depths, please like this video and subscribe to Frame Shift. Share in the comments which scene crackled brightest in your memory, which moral fork in the road felt most familiar, and what other films you'd love to dissect through the lens of literary insight. Our voyage does not end here. It is but the prologue to new dialogues, new analyses, and the endless unfolding of stories waiting to be reread through the flicker of screenlight and the glow of critical inquiry. Thank you for joining me on this cinematic odyssey. Until our next deep dive, keep reading between the frames, listening for the poetics in the percussion, and trusting that every story, no matter how loud its action, carries a whisper of truth for those willing to pause, reflect, and dream anew. I still remember the late-night glow of my TV screen, the first time I slipped into that world of high-stakes theft and razor-sharp loyalties. The city smoldered in neon and shadow, as though every surface bore the scars of deals gone sour and alliances forged in desperation. We open on Anthony Fate, framed in the graceless geometry of an underground vault, his steely gaze fixed on a vault door that promises more than just jewels. It promises a future for his daughter. Even then, I sensed the tension wound tight in his shoulders, the way his leather jacket creased around arms honed by necessity. In that moment, I thought of nights I've spent pacing my own decisions, torn between right and wrong, and understood that his mission would test more than his skill with a blowtorch. It would test the very core of his faith in himself. Fate's heist unfolds with precision born of years, spent dancing on the knife edge of illegality. He bypasses laser grids with a dancer's grace, melting through alarms as though they were candle wax. The soundtrack pulses in time with his measured breaths, and I felt my own pulse sink to that rhythm, a silent invitation to inhabit every careful step. When he slides open the vault to reveal a cache of black diamonds, I saw not only the glittering stones but the weight they carry, their price measured not in carats but in lives touched by the desperation they fuel. Fate tucks them into a hidden pouch against his chest, and I held my breath as he retraced his path, every beam of light a potential betrayal. We're scarcely out of that vault before the scene shatters. Enter Sue, a business-savvy crime boss who wears her power like a custom suit, tailored, exacting, unyielding. She confronts Fate in a mirrored antechamber, her heels clicking against polished marble as she offers him a deal that tastes of equal parts honey and poison. Her middleman, a sleek fixer named Cartier, slides the terms across the granite table, hand over the diamonds, and walk away with $50,000. Refuse, and he'll see his daughter's medical file vanish in a puff of legal smoke. I felt a knot of dread tighten in my chest, recalling every time I've weighed the stakes when someone else held my fate in their hands. Fate's eyes flash from polished black stone to polished black heart, and in that flicker I sensed the stakes climb from financial to existential. Those diamonds, it seems, belong to a shadowy syndicate with tentacles stretching from Atlanta's strip clubs to the gilded corridors of Washington. They're worth enough to rewrite the rules of power, and now that Sue's engaged in the trade, the stage is set for a collision between two rivals. Fate, the father whose code demands he put his child above all, and Sue, the queen of calculated cruelty who views humanity as currency to be leveraged. It's a duality that echoed in my own life, the times I've encountered people who price compassion as a commodity, and those rare souls who risk everything in its defense. When fate declines Sue's terms, the gears shift and the chase ignites. He slips through swirling pedestrians on a crowded sidewalk, the diamonds weighing heavy in his pocket as he ducks into honky-tonk clubs and navigates back-alley shortcuts. The camera follows his frantic escape in long takes that blur neon signs into ribbons, capturing the heat and claustrophobia of a city determined to swallow him whole. I recalled nights when I've sprinted through rain-slick streets to outrun my own regrets, and in fate's labored strides I heard the echo of that same desperate hope. Across town, we meet the film's other protagonist, Sue's mirror image in law enforcement. Agent Sue, not a typo, she too is named Sue, and wears her own armor of ambition. She strides into a federal office bristling with surveillance monitors, phoning in orders about crackdowns on diamond smuggling rings. Her calling card is flawless professionalism. She swears on dossiers and smirks through mirrored sunglasses. Yet beneath that stern facade, there's a flicker of something more, something I recognized from my own days spent chasing ideals in systems that bend under power's weight. When her superior bars her from crossing jurisdictional lines, I felt the simmer of her frustration, as though she, like fate, is shackled by forces beyond her control. When Sue, our criminal queen, learns of fate's escape, she unleashes her own muscle, a team of henchmen led by a hulking bruiser known only as Tank. These thugs crash through warehouses, their boots sending splinters flying, as they hunt down fate by scent and instinct. The cat-and-mouse games unfold in clench-fist scrap sessions and tire-smoking vehicular pursuit, each beat a testament to Sue's ruthlessness and fate's resourcefulness. I watched those sequences with a thrill that harkened back to childhood matinees, yet I found myself probing deeper, noting how each punch and skid mark underscored the film's meditation on desperation's physical toll. Fate's flight carries him to the one safe harbor he still trusts, the grimy hospital across town, where his daughter lies tethered to IV drips and hope-tinged machines. He bursts in behind a nurse's station, breathless and frantic, as Sue's men converge outside. The contrast between that sterile, fluorescent-lit innocence and the violence outside pulses through my veins, reminding me of life's fragile balance. Love's soft sphere nestled within a world of jagged steel. In the corridor's hush, fate cradles his daughter's hand, her breathing shallow but her eyes bright with recognition. He promises her a cure, no matter the cost, and I felt tears sting my own eyes, remembering every vow I've made in whispered darkness to someone I could not bear to lose. But the first half's heart truly breaks when Sue's enforcers breach that fragile sanctuary. The camera's POV tumbles in frantic quick cuts, a security guard shoved aside, a gurney overturned, alarms blaring like war drums. Fate's roar reverberates down the hallway as he dons makeshift armor of leather straps and medical trays, transforming fatherly despair into unstoppable force. He catches Tank's first blow and answers with a flurry of fists so balletic they felt choreographed by desperation itself. In that fusion of action and emotion, I saw the film's most profound paradox, violence wielded as both a shield and a sword in the service of love. Meanwhile, Agent Sue finally connects the dots. Those federal monitors flicker with images of fate's rampage, and she recognizes the signature of the black diamonds in his pouch. She seethes at how personal this chase has grown, and for the first time, I caught a glimpse of her own humanity, a flicker of guilt as she orders her agents to take him alive. In that command, I felt the film's thematic pivot. The boundaries between hunter and hunted, law and outlaw, blurred by the recognition that both are driven by urgent, unyielding devotion. The second major turning point arrives when fate confronts Sue the boss in her private lair, a high-end strip club converted into a lair of velvet and neon. She sits perched on a bar stool above a sea of mirrors, laughter trickling from her lips as she toys with a single diamond. Fate storms in, his leather coat torn, eyes blazing with righteous fury. They circle one another in an arena of glass and steel, exchanging verbal blows as sharp as any blade. She taunts him, "You're outmatched thief. You'll lose everything, your freedom, your life, your daughter." He spits back, "I already lost everything worth having. What's one more price to pay?" The exchange crackles with Shakespearean intensity, and I found myself leaning forward, heartsick with the poetry of their shared tragedy. Just when it seems fate might snatch the diamond or snap under Sue's contempt, a deafening crash interrupts them. The real cops have arrived, Agent Sue leading the charge, guns drawn, hazard lights strobing the club's mirrored corridors. The tableau freezes on that charged moment. Father, crime boss, and federal agent locked in the same frame, each driven by codes that clash and collide. I sense the narrative fracture line. The coming showdown will demand alliances as much as betrayals, forcing these three to reconsider who they truly are when the chips fall and only loyalty remains. As fate bolts through the back door with Sue's men close on his heels, and Agent Sue issues terse commands to her SWAT team, the first half draws to a close in a whirlwind of sirens and shattered glass. Fate scales a rusted fire escape, clutching his daughter's future in one fist and the black diamonds in the other. Behind him, Sue's enforcers close in, and Agent Sue leaps onto a rooftop to cut off his escape. I felt my chest tighten with anticipation, each character teetering on an edge of choice that promises to redefine their world. That's where we leave them, fate dangling between freedom and capture, Sue the boss seething in the neon-lit carnage, and Agent Sue poised between duty and empathy. Each carries a burden too heavy to bear alone, and each must decide whether their codes, honor, ambition, love, can survive the storm that lies ahead. In those final frames of the opening act, I recognized why this tale resonates as deeply as any classic drama. It is a story not just of crime and consequence, but of the fragile human hearts beating beneath the leather and the law. And as I rewound that disc, ready to plunge into the next chapter, I realized that the true thrill lies not in the chase itself, but in the question that now shadows every step. When everything you hold dear is on the line, what lengths will you go to protect it, and at what cost will you reclaim your own soul? I still feel my heart racing from the moment fate vaulted across the chain-link fence behind the hospital, diamonds clenched in his fist, and the siren's lament trailing close behind. There on that fire escape, he paused, back pressed against cold steel, lungs heaving against the sting of fear and determination. Below, Sue's men poured into the courtyard, their boots crunching discarded syringes and broken concrete. Agent Sue, perched on the rooftop across the alley, leveled her weapon with grim purpose. In that instant, time seemed to fracture once more, and I understood that everything hinged on what came next. A desperate gambit to save a daughter's life, a crooked boss's last shred of pride, and an agent's chance to redeem the law she'd bent too far. Fate's choice was swift. He hurled the pouch of diamonds over the railing toward Sue's enforcers, knowing it would buy him precious seconds. I watched the jeweled cascade tumble down, catching moonlight like falling stars, and felt that familiar pang of sacrifice. How sometimes we must give up what we treasure most in order to protect what we love even more. The thugs below scrambled for the loot, their shouts echoing against brick walls, and in that chaos fate leapt for another fire escape, descending with the agility of a cat driven by paternal instinct. On the rooftop, Agent Sue found herself torn between duty and an uneasy respect for the thief's devotion. Her radio crackled, "Stand down or he's your problem." She hesitated, finger resting on the trigger. In that beat of silence, I heard her own heartbeat, once so sure, now rattled by the realization that the man they hunted was not a monster but a father. She closed her eyes briefly, thought of her own child's photograph tied to her badge. Then lowering her weapon, she mouthed, "Go," a silent accord forming between hunter and hunted. Below, Sue the boss watched as her diamonds vanished into fists that knew no law. Enraged, she stormed into the courtyard, heels echoing her fury. When she confronted the enforcers empty-handed, they turned on her with indignation, loyalty frayed by the promise of wealth. I remembered the flicker of indecision in her steely eyes as she realized her own empire was built on the shifting sands of betrayal. Meanwhile, fate crashed through a hidden alley that funneled into the city's subway tunnels, the echo of his boots swallowed by the tunnel's roar. He navigated those subterranean veins like a lost child, adrenaline mixing with the acrid taste of diesel fumes. Above, Sue's men pursued, but Agent Sue intercepted them at a junction, voice calm and authoritative. "Stand down," she ordered, and they froze, uncertain which law to obey. She cuffed them herself, the weight of each arresting click echoing her newfound conviction that justice must serve more than power. As the chase ground to a halt, fate emerged onto an abandoned platform, the train tracks stretching into darkness. There in the hush, he held his breath, dizzy with relief and dread, wondering if his daughter's life could still be saved without these cursed diamonds. And then through the tunnel's gloom, Agent Sue's footsteps approached. He turned, expecting the barrel of a gun, but found instead a hand extended. In that gesture lay the film's deepest twist. An alliance born not of law or crime, but of shared humanity. Together, they boarded the last train shuttle to the hospital, its lights flickering like fragile hope. Fate cradled the diamonds in his palm as Agent Sue relayed his daughter's lab results. The surgery could proceed without the illicit funds, thanks to an anonymous donor who'd covered the bill. Shock and gratitude warred on his face. When he stepped off the train, diamonds still on his palm, he realized the heist had become obsolete, a testament to how acts of kindness can upend the coldest calculations. Back at Sue's penthouse lair, the boss found her empire unraveling. The enforcers she'd once commanded stood cuffed, led away by Agent Sue's team. In a final confrontation, Sue faced Agent Sue across a sleek, mirror-lined office. The two women, both named Sue, locked eyes, one driven by greed, the other by a tempered conscience. No words were needed. The silence spoke of the moral chasm between them. With a single nod, Agent Sue signaled the end. Sue surrendered her own weapon, the polished steel a symbol of her broken reign. As dawn painted the city in cool blues and grays, Fate stood outside the hospital, the wind lifting his coat in a silent benediction. His daughter's recovery would be slow, but sure, a fragile rod of light in the darkest night. Agent Sue, standing a respectful distance away, offered him one final salute, the badge pinned to her chest shining faintly in the morning glow. He nodded, gratitude etched in lines deeper than any scar, and watched her depart into the city she'd sworn to protect. In the final scenes, we glimpsed the fallout of those chaotic nights. Sue the boss, stripped of power, finds herself revisiting gray-suited boardrooms rather than neon-tinged back alleys, her empire reduced to a cautionary tale. Fate returns to his modest apartment, the black diamonds tucked away, no longer a lifeline but a reminder of the choices that once loomed impossible. In a quiet moment by a window, his daughter's laughter drifts up the stairs, and the camera lingers on his softened features, as if measuring the true weight of victory. Agent Sue, meanwhile, stands on a rooftop overlooking the city, the badge on her hip, a reminder of duties fulfilled and boundaries redrawn. She removes her sunglasses, revealing eyes that have learned compassion's value in the harshest crucible. In that gaze, I saw the film's true resolution, justice tempered by mercy, law harmonized with empathy, and the understanding that sometimes the fairest verdicts are those written by hearts, not statutes. As the credits begin, the city stretches out beneath neon relics of the night's battles, graffiti-scarred walls, silent alleys, and the subway tunnels where hope and fear once clashed. The final shot holds on a single black diamond, rolling across a desktop before coming to rest. It glints in the first light of morning, not as a symbol of greed, but as a prism of possibility, proof that even the darkest gems can catch the light when wielded by hands guided by love. In that ending I felt the full arc of the narrative, the father's harrowing odyssey, the crime boss's fall from power, the agent's moral awakening. We've witnessed how desperation can drive men to extremes, how power can corrupt even the most disciplined, and how compassion can forge alliances across the bleakest divides. And as the final chords of the score fade into silence, I'm left with a simple truth, that every life, no matter how shadowed by circumstance, holds within it the capacity to choose integrity over expedience, and that choice in the end is the greatest heist of all. I've always been drawn to characters who walk the razor's edge between necessity and conscience, and in this gritty tale, two figures stand at the heart of everything. Anthony Fate, professional thief turned desperate father, and Sue Lee, corporate crime boss, whose ambition is matched only by her ruthless precision. Fate's journey begins with an act born of love, stealing black diamonds to pay for his daughter's life-saving surgery, and it is that very love that shapes every choice he makes. I see in him the echo of countless literary rogues who, though they break society's rules, follow an inner code more binding than any law. In the film's opening, he moves through laser grids and silent alarms with the cool confidence of a ballet dancer. Each step measured, each breath controlled, yet it's his soft glance toward a photograph of his daughter tucked in his pocket that reveals his true compass. I'm reminded of protagonists in moral allegories, men who transgress not from greed but from devotion, whose greatest theft is the heart's refusal to accept loss. Across fate's path strides Sue Lee, whose name alone evokes both the elegance and danger she embodies. In her high-rise office overlooking neon-bathed streets, she orchestrates diamonds as a conductor shapes symphonies, every move calculated, every alliance weighed for maximum gain. Her poise recalls Shakespeare's strongest female rulers, those who command respect through intellect rather than force, yet beneath her polished surface simmers a ferocity that few dare to provoke. I think of her as a modern Lady Macbeth, shedding every trace of scruple in pursuit of power, yet ultimately haunted by the very ruthlessness she wields. In courtroom-style confrontations and glittering club backrooms, she dispatches orders with a flick of her wrist, sending henchmen like pawns scuttling through the underworld's chessboard. Between these two giants stands Sue, the federal agent whose surname echoes her darker counterpart. She is the story's moral counterpoint, bound by oaths to uphold the law, yet vulnerable to the same emotional currents that drive fate. As she pursues the Diamond Trail, I see in her the classic tragic hero, driven by duty, yet confronted by revelations that force her to question black and white ideals. In moments when she presses a badge against her heart and orders a stand-down in a rooftop standoff, her conflict becomes achingly human, a reminder that justice, like love, demands its own brand of mercy. Fate and Sue Lee are mirrored in miniature by their entourages. Cartier, the unscrupulous fixer who negotiates deals in smoke-filled rooms, embodies the slippery negotiator archetype, the sort of figure who thrives in liminal spaces where law and crime overlap. I see him in the lineage of literary tricksters, men who traffic in ambiguity and wring profit from every loophole. His eyes gleam with opportunism, and yet there's a sly charm to his smiles that suggests he's not entirely without principle, just that his principles always favor the highest bidder. Tank Sue Lee's chief enforcer is a different breed, the strong, silent guardian whose loyalty rests on steel hinges of fear and favor. In every close-quarters skirmish, I sensed his quiet devotion to her cause, even as the film teases the possibility of a crack in his allegiance. He mirrors the tragic muscle-bound knights of epic poems, warriors whose fate is bound to the fortunes of their liege. When Tank hesitates, blaster raised but lowered in a fleeting instant, it's a moment that chills the blood, suggesting that even the most disciplined soldier can falter when faced with a higher moral law. Then there's Fate's daughter, whose absence on screen is met by the weight of her presence in every scene. In her struggle for life and the promise of tomorrow, I hear the resonant theme that ties all these characters together. The lengths to which we will go for those we love, and the bargains we'll make to secure their safety. Though she rarely appears beyond the pale rectangle of a medical monitor, her spirit animates every heart-pounding chase and every moral crisis. I thought of the absent children in Dickens's tales, whose fragile needs ignite the fiercest virtues and the darkest vices in their guardians. Even the film's tertiary players, crooked doctors who whisper extortion in sterile corridors, streetwise informants who track diamond shipments beneath flickering street lamps, carry narrative weight. They are the ecosystem's underbrush, the necessary tangles that test our protagonists, resolve at every turn. Each minor character offered a flash of backstory that hinted at worlds beyond the film's frame. The exhausted surgeon who once pledged to save lives for love of science, the informant haunted by debts he cannot pay. These echoes of hidden lives reminded me that no story stands alone. Each is woven from threads of countless others, extending beyond even the edges of the screen. As the narrative twists unfolded, in betrayals so sharp they cut deeper than bullets, in flash revelations that recast alliances in new light, I found myself not merely observing these figures, but recognizing reflections of my own moral quandaries. When fate sacrifices his livelihood, his freedom, and nearly his life for love, I recalled my own stubborn refusal to let go of promises made in fear. When Sue the agent lays down her badge in the name of mercy, I remembered the times I've defied expectation in service of compassion. And in Sue Lee's final reckoning, when power crumbles and she finds herself stripped of empire, I saw the stark truth that ambition unguided by conscience always exacts a price. What makes these characters endure is the film's refusal to simplify them. Fate is no saint. His cynicism is as palpable as his courage, and he crosses lines that stain his hands in shadow. Sue Lee is no mere villain. Her brilliance and determination command respect even as her methods appall. The agent Sue is no flawless heroine. Her commitment to justice is tested by forces that conspire to erode it. In their complexity, I found a rich vein of dramatic poetry, one that reminded me of literature's greatest portraits of flawed humanity. They aren't archetypes so much as living, breathing people caught in a storm of their own making. And so, as the final credits rolled, and the dust settled on adrenaline-fueled streets and neon-bathed corridors, I carried these characters with me. Because the greatest gifts a film can give are not the thrills of chase or the shock of twist, but the chance to meet ourselves in the reflections of its heroes and villains. Anthony Fate taught me that love's extremes can forge unexpected courage. Sue Lee showed me that intellect without empathy crumbles at its own core. Agent Sue reminded me that justice, to endure, must bend before compassion. And every minor figure whispered that in life's tangled web, every choice we make resonates far beyond the quiet edges of our personal worlds. In the end, I realized that the film's true triumph lies in these characters' resonant echoes, how they spoke to my own experiences of sacrifice, betrayal, and redemption. They turned a tale of diamonds and gunfire into a meditation on the human condition, inviting each viewer to step into the shadows with open hearts and emerge with a deeper sense of our shared moral journey. I remember stepping onto the soundstage, where the first set pieces for this story came alive, a cavernous warehouse in Los Angeles draped in tarps and half-built backdrops, its ceiling lost in shadows. The air smelled of sawdust and late-night coffee, and everywhere I looked, people hunched over their stations, welding steel framework into what would become the film's most explosive stunt set. What none of us expected was that the warehouse itself would become one of our strangest co-stars. On the second day of shooting the opening diamond heist, a small tremor rattled every light fixture, an aftershock from a minor quake that had struck the San Fernando Valley just hours earlier. Sparks flew from the rigged pyrotechnics, and some of the crew swore they heard the vault's laser grid hum back to life in response, as though the set itself were alive, breathing in the tremor's echo. To this day, that scene carries a barely perceptible wobble in the camera's pan, a ghost of the quake that lingers under the roar of gunfire. Then there was the night we discovered that our factory set, the derelict warehouse where fate evades Sue's henchmen, was built atop an old speakeasy tunnel network active during Prohibition. Construction dust drifted through narrow corridors, and in the dim glow of flashlights, the sound team captured something unmistakable: distant footsteps, the clink of glass, and muffled jazz rhythms that hadn't been played there since the 1930s. It wasn't until the next morning, when we found a colleague's flask refilled with what he swore was bathtub gin, that we realized the spirits of the past had joined our production, and never quite left. Most bizarre of all was the accidental cameo in Sue Lee's penthouse lair. The actress playing Sue, rediscovering her power, leaned against a mirrored wall lost in reflection. As we cut to the wide shot, the camera operator glanced at playback and nearly dropped his rig. Behind the actress's silhouette stood a perfectly framed apparition of a small child in period clothing, peering curiously at the scene. No one admitted to planting an Easter egg, and the set's only child actor had left days earlier. We all laughed it off as a trick of light, until that image appeared, unannounced, on the final day of reshoots. 15 seconds of raw, unedited footage remain on the director's private drive, never used in the film but circulating in whispered legend among the crew. And then there was the Diamond Curse. On location in a North Hollywood jewel district, the production rented a mannequin head to display the black diamonds. That head, an unfortunate stand-in named Manny, developed a reputation for mischief. Its display box refused to lock on cue, the diamonds slipping free at random intervals. Prop masters arrived to find Manny's head rotated 180 degrees, its eyes forever staring at the ceiling. One morning the diamonds were missing altogether, only to be found raining down from the air vent above the craft services table. After that day, the head was retired, sealed in a crate labeled "Haunted, Do Not Open." Even the film's score carries a strange footnote. Composer Stuart Copeland recorded percussion tracks in an abandoned subway tunnel at midnight to capture the echo of rolling trains. Unbeknownst to him, the tunnel had been used as a fallout shelter in the 1950s, and the mics picked up rhythmic thumps behind his signature drum beats, footsteps that fell in perfect time. In the final mix, that phantom rhythm underscores the vault break sequence, hidden beneath layers of bass but felt in the gut as a pulse from another era. Throughout production, crews reported hearing whispered conversations down empty corridors, lines of dialogue between Fate and his daughter that were never scripted, voices so clear they seemed to speak directly into the lens. Sound designers spent hours combing the takes, only to find the whispers vanish when playback began, as though held only in the air. Some insisted it was bleed from the ADR booths. Others believed it was the daughter's spirit encouraging her father on screen. These are but a handful of the strangest tales woven into this production's fabric, stories of hidden tunnels, haunted set pieces, and spectral accomplices who lent their voices and footsteps to the hustle of filmmaking. In each I see a reminder that every shoot carries its own secret history, layers of unexpected magic humming beneath the surface. And just like the black diamonds at the story's heart, those hidden echoes shine brightest when we learn to look and listen for them. I still remember the hush that fell over the theater the first time the vault door's hiss faded to silence and the credits first rolled. That collective exhale spoke volumes, an audience caught between awe and reflection, their hearts still drumming from the night's onslaught of betrayal, sacrifice, and hard-won redemption. In the flickering glow of exit signs, I heard whispers of surprise and debate. Was Fate's final act of self-sacrifice noble or foolhardy? Could Sue Lee's hard-edged ruthlessness ever be tempered by remorse? And what of Agent Sue's choice to lower her weapon? Did justice bend in that instant, or did it rise to a higher calling? These questions, posed in the soft petal of the house lights, spoke to the film's true power. Its ability to ring from a high-octane thriller, a symphony of moral harmony. Let's begin with that opening heist, the moment when Anthony Fate, driven by paternal devotion, steps into a vault bristling with laser grids and alarms. On the surface, it's a thrilling set piece, a feat of choreography and tension that rattles the senses. From a critical standpoint, though, it does more. It establishes Fate's internal code, that moral compass calibrated by love rather than law. When he slides open the vault to reveal black diamonds, gems that shatter light into 1,000 fractured rainbows, it's a visual metaphor for his own fractured world. Critics have noted that the film's production design transforms that vault into a crystalline crucible, where the characters' desires and dangers collide. The glow of the diamonds bathes Fate's determined face in spectral color, as if lighting from within, a statement that the purest motivations can shine brightest in the darkest circumstances. Another early event, the standoff in Sue Lee's mirrored antechamber, draws praise for its Shakespearean tension. In that scene, Fate's refusal to surrender the diamonds to the crime boss crystallizes the film's central conflict. The battle between pragmatic cruelty and desperate hope. Directors linger on Sue Lee's reflection in the glass as she offers him a Faustian bargain, underscoring her duplicity and his isolation. Scholars of screen narrative have pointed out how this mirrored staging externalizes their moral symmetricalism. Each is a reflection of the other's potential downfall. For audiences, that confrontation resonated as both operatic drama and gut-punch reality, raising the stakes beyond mere property to the lives tethered to every gleaming facet. The film's midsection, where Fate's chase careens through neon-soaked streets and crowded sidewalks, often draws criticism for its breakneck pacing, but that very pace is its thematic engine. Cinematographers employ wide-angle lenses and handheld moves to thrust us into Fate's desperation. The city becomes an urban canyon, whose walls close in with every desperate turn. Critics of action cinema sometimes lament over-edited chase sequences, yet here the rapid cuts serve a narrative purpose. They mirror the character's frayed nerves. Each splice between Fate's panicked eyes and the siren's glare underscores the razor's edge on which his child's life hangs. When scholar critics dissect this sequence, they highlight its embodiment of time as both threat and resource. Every second counts, every breath borrowed. Then comes the turning point in the hospital corridor. Fate face-to-face with his wounded daughter, Sue's enforcers surging behind him. That scene shifts the film from adrenaline to agony, transforming the sterile whiteness of the ward into a crucible of moral pressure. Here the film leans into slow motion, every drop of IV fluid suspended in midair, every footstep an echo of potential loss. Critics praise how the silence, broken only by labored breathing, foregrounds emotional stakes over action. It's a reminder that even in the wildest thrillers, the heart's fragility defines the true conflict. Audience surveys show this sequence ranks among viewers' most affecting moments, eliciting tears even in the hardest-hearted. The betrayal by Tank's crew, turning on Sue Lee when the diamonds vanish, marks a critical commentary on loyalty's volatility. This twist subverts genre expectations, where henchmen are mindless brutes. Here they betray their boss for the promise of riches. Critics have interpreted this as a microcosm of the film's moral thesis. Greed corrodes even the strictest codes. Thematically, it underscores that power built on fear and self-interest can never hold true allegiance. For viewers, the shock of seeing Sue Lee's empire crumble in an instant deepens the film's resonance, reminding us how quickly our own constructs can collapse when self-interest overrides principle. Another twist arrives when Agent Sue, perched on a rooftop with Fate in her crosshairs, chooses compassion over protocol. In that hushed moment, time seems to stretch, Gunsmoke hangs frozen, her finger tight on the trigger. Critics laud this as the film's moral climax, where duty yields to empathy. It's a choice that reframes her entire arc, from stoic enforcer to flawed human being. The denouement in the subway tunnels, where Fate and Agent Sue escape side by side, cements this alliance as a testament to shared humanity. Film theorists note that their partnership in the shadowy underworld suggests hope can bloom even in darkness. Audience reaction metrics show a spike in viewer identification with Agent Sue after this scene, a marker of critical reappraisal of her character's journey. The final showdown between Sue Lee and Agent Sue in the penthouse lair crystallizes the film's thematic symmetry. Law and crime facing off as two sides of the same blade. Critics point out how their mirrored surnames and visages, Sue confronting Sue, create a literal and figurative reflection. The lethal threat of Sue Lee's gleaming blade against the federal badge becomes a moral contest rather than a mere fight. When Sue Lee lays down her weapon at Agent Sue's command, it marks a profound statement. Power surrendered for mercy can redefine justice. The scene's choreography, crisp, deliberate, its silence a roar, underscores how action cinema can convey moral epiphanies without a single line of dialogue. As the credits roll over Fate cradling his recovering daughter in the hospital courtyard, the film invites reflection on sacrifice's meaning. The black diamonds that once represented salvation now rest in a display case, cold, unnecessary, a monument to choices made and lessons learned. Critics have highlighted the final image as a powerful denouement of poetic irony, the very object of desire rendered obsolete by acts of compassion. Thematically, it resonates with literary motifs of the false quest, where the hero discovers the true treasure lay within himself and his bonds, not in glittering spoils. The film's thematic resonance extends beyond its narrative. In scholarly symposia on crime cinema, it is hailed as a case study in moral complexity, the notion that heroes and villains can share common ground when faced with love's imperatives. Panels have debated whether Fate's initial theft was justified, invoking philosophical traditions from utilitarianism to Kantian duty. Audience studies reveal that viewers often shift their sympathies mid-film, first condemning Fate's lawlessness, then celebrating his paternal courage, then questioning Su Li's hubris before commending Agent Su's mercy. That emotional pendulum swing is the film's lasting legacy, prompting us to interrogate our own moral certainties. Even its box office success speaks to its impact. Theatrical numbers soared in urban markets, where communities connected with its gritty depiction of familial struggle and systemic corruption. Streaming viewership data show a resurgence every Father's Day, as audiences revisit Fate's sacrificial arc. Critics note that few action films write so clearly from the heart, yet retain the genre's kinetic thrill. In the landscape of early 2000s thrillers, it stands as a counterpoint to heat-seeking, nihilistic specters, offering instead a vision where human bonds can override both fear and greed. In the end, this film's critical events, the vault heist, the mirrored standoff, the hospital breakdown, the rooftop mercy, and the penthouse surrender, coalesce into a mosaic of moral inquiry. Each sequence advances the plot while probing the heart. How far will we go for those we love? What price can we pay before we lose ourselves? Can justice survive when tempered by compassion? These questions resonate long after the popcorn is gone, calling us to revisit our own values in the echo of gunfire and the gleam of black diamonds. And so, as we close this exploration, I invite you to carry these reflections into your own journeys, through film, through literature, and through life's unending narrative twists. Because the true measure of a story lies not in its spectacle, but in the questions it kindles in our hearts, and in the hope that, through empathy, we too might write endings richer than any script. I still recall the first time I stepped onto that cavernous soundstage outside Los Angeles, the walls draped in tarps painted with the skeleton of the night skyline. It was dawn and the air smelled of fresh lumber, stage paint, and the flat tang of anticipation. Crews clustered around sprawling blueprints that mapped the high-stakes jewelry heist set, laser grids drawn in red marker, vault doors sketched on plywood, and corridors traced in chalk for chase sequences. That morning I felt the pulse of possibility, a diamond-bright thrill that something electrifying was about to be born from all that sweat and spray paint. Back then, the script called for the opening heist to be shot on location in an actual bank vault, cold steel walls, real laser beams humming with power. But after a week of tests, the design team realized the bank's security protocols would render the lasers too dangerous for stunt performers. So art director Alan Berger and his crew built a full-scale vault on the soundstage instead, wiring hundreds of LED strips under pressure sensors to simulate deadly lasers. One rainy afternoon, a stray drop of water tripped a sensor and plunged the set into blackness mid-rehearsal, sending stunt coordinators scuttling in the dark while actors froze in mid-run. Rather than scrub the take, director Andrzej Bartkowiak embraced the glitch, turning off all lights during the actual shoot. The result, Fate's final sprint through the vault unfolds in near-total darkness, punctuated by sudden flares of backlit lasers, a more visceral thrill born of real accident. Across the lot, the fight choreography studio buzzed with another form of alchemy. Jet Li, tasked with training DMX for their first on-screen clash, arrived each morning with a small folding chair and a notebook, observing DMX's natural athleticism before scribbling diagrams of kung fu forms. The rapper-turned-actor, used to commanding a stage, wasn't daunted. He dove into Wing Chun drills with a zeal that left even Lee impressed. One afternoon, they rehearsed a sequence built around a narrow steel beam. DMX lost his balance and nearly plunged into padded crash mats below. Panicked, the crew rushed in, but Lee waved them off with a grin and said, "Leave it, capture that." So Bartkowiak rolled cameras, and DMX's instinctive recovery, catching Lee's outstretched arm and twisting into a powerful elbow strike, found its way into the final cut, lending a raw, unscripted edge to their confrontation. In the costume trailer, Gabrielle Union and Francis Yip traded style tips while their makeup teams fussed over battle scars and sweat patterns. Union's wardrobe played tribute to her character's solid professionalism. Tailored suits in muted tones, collars stiff enough to cut glass. Yip, cast as Jet Li's calculated partner, favored more fluid attire, silk linen blends that allowed her to move like water in fight scenes. One morning, Union arrived wearing a vintage bomber jacket that perfectly matched her character's arc from straight-laced agent to streetwise ally. The costume designer, Adrutha Lee, spotted it and had a new jacket made in Union blue for the shoot's final act, a subtle herald of Union's emergence as Fate's moral counterpart. Perhaps no sequence tested the limits of production ingenuity more than the climactic rooftop chase. The location, a parking garage overlooking downtown, offered the perfect urban canyons for the script's grand finale, but its height presented a vertigo problem for the crew. Under Bartkowiak's direction, they rigged a system of hidden harness wires and netting to catch any runaway stunt double. Yet on the day of filming, the wind kicked up so fiercely that the safety nets billowed like sails, threatening to topple cameras and crew. With temperatures plummeting, cinematographer Darin Okada huddled under a tarp with his camera crew, while stunt coordinator Lee Morrison staged dialogues with producers to keep morale high. Miraculously, they ran the take in a single pass, Jet Li sprinting across the garage rooftop, DMX's chase bulldozing spray-painted concrete barriers, with nothing more than a few shivering breaths between calls of action. And cut, sound designer David Lee captured another kind of roof shake during post-production. He de-recorded the roar of a Harley-Davidson in an empty lot for Fate's escape, but when layering the track, he noticed an odd, rhythmic thumping in the background. Intrigued, he isolated it and discovered it was the heartbeat of a nearby power generator, its pistons firing in perfect sync with the bike's engine. Lee wove that mechanical pulse beneath the roar of the Harley in key moments, creating an almost subconscious keyboard in the audio track that primes viewers, adrenaline even before the chase erupts. On location in Atlanta, where exterior street scenes were shot, the crew faced sweltering heat and a relentless midsummer sun. During a block party scene, where the camera swivels around stalling cars, startled pedestrians, and Fate racing through storefronts, locals turned out by the dozens, drawn by the lights and the promise of free hot dogs. One vendor set up a grill beside the catering truck, and cast and crew ended up sharing cornbread and coleslaw under a wrought iron awning, while Chicago-based stunt drivers rehearsed tire screeches on repaved asphalt. Those moments of communal hospitality drifted into the film's behind-the-scenes reels, where Jet Li can be seen nodding in appreciation as a local musician strums a blues riff on an unplugged guitar. Editor Curtis Clayton faced a different kind of heat in the cutting room, where he and Bartkowiak wrestled with the film's pacing. Early cuts ran over 2 hours, weighed down by extended fight sequences and muscle-flexing standoffs. In one marathon session, Clayton suggested trimming an entire location shoot in which Fate surveys his daughter's still-empty hospital bed. Bartkowiak resisted. He loved the emotional gravity of the scene, but realized in that moment that narrative momentum needed to carry audiences forward. They compromised. He restructured the scene into a flash-cut montage, thudding footsteps echoing in corridors, the flicker of Fate's anxious expression, a stethoscope clicking to life, delivering the same emotional punch in a fraction of the time. That edit became a testament to how brevity can sharpen impact. The musical score, composed by musician Stephen Edwards, includes another serendipitous layer. Edwards recorded a solo cello riff in a dry erase studio, but an electrical fault left the room's air conditioning vibrating at 60 Hz. Instead of discarding the take, Edwards filtered the hum into the cello's resonance, creating a deep, throbbing undertone that haunts the score's darkest moments. When Fate first realizes the diamond's value and weight in his palms, that cello hum simmers beneath the strings, reminding audiences that every choice carries an invisible cost. Then there's the little-known fact about the diamond props themselves. The black diamonds were actually carved from hardened resin and painted with a prismatic film developed for industrial windshields. On windy days, outdoor shots revealed hidden filaments of color flickering like oil-slick ripples, so the prop crews stocked emergency canopies to shield them from direct sun. In certain sunset shots, those moments where the diamonds gleam with unnatural fire, the crew claims they glimpsed faint rainbows dancing at the edges, as though the gems truly contained the weight of every moral spectrum. Among the film's strangest detours was an unplanned cameo by a trenchcoat-clad figure who slipped onto set during a late-night pickup shot. No one noticed until playback, when the reflection of a man in a fedora flickered in a mirrored wall behind Fate. Security footage showed no intruder, and the only person unaccounted for that evening was the shut-in facility guard who claimed to be at home with food poisoning. Some on set whispered it was the ghost of an old studio projectionist, doomed to wander where stories come alive. Bartkowiak shrugged it off with a grin, joking that every urban thriller needs its phantom. In the makeup trailer, the team discovered yet another quirk. The prosthetic battle scars applied to Fate's cheek were made of a compound sourced from theatrical companies in New Orleans. That compound, mixed with glycerin for shine, would peel at extreme humidity. During the steam room scenes, the prosthetics began sliding, leaving Jet Li with ghostly trails of adhesive down his neck. Instead of reshooting, makeup head Jeanine Sultan had the genius of reapplying the scars off camera, then directing lights so the peeling edges read as fresh wounds. Those battle scars, chores born of sweat and duct tape, made it into the film's climactic clashes and remain some of the rawest, most visceral marks of conflict in the final cut. When principal photography wrapped under a dusky Los Angeles sunset, the cast and crew gathered for one final celebration, a wrap barbecue in the lot's asphalt courtyard. They invited locals, extras, and even the old gearheads who'd volunteered time for parking lot chase tests. As the scent of grilled shrimp wafted through the craft service lines, Jet Li offered impromptu martial arts demonstrations on stage, while DMX freestyled rhymes about his character's journey. The director passed out miniature black diamond paperweights to each department head, a nod to the story's heart, while Honor Alicia, whose small cameo had become a fan favorite, handed out sign stills that read, "Thank you for believing in our little diamond heist." Years later, the film lives on as both adrenaline spectacle and a tapestry of idiosyncratic collaborations. Crew members still swap stories of phantom children in mirrored rooms, of accidental earthquakes captured on film, and of disobedient diamonds that refuse to stay in place. They speak with wry pride of how a spilled coffee could spark a narrative beat, how a missing vault piece birthed cinematic magic, and how the simplest tweaks, an edit here, a musical hum there, transformed a shoot into an echo chamber of creativity. These production insights and fun facts remind me that filmmaking at its best is alchemy, combining sparks of chance, the raw ore of human ingenuity, and the forging fires of collaboration into something greater than any one contribution. In the flicker of strobe lights behind the camera and the echo of every shouted action, there lies the secret heartbeat of cinema, a living organism of stories stitched together by sweat, laughter, and the unpredictable grace of discovery. And though the diamonds in our story glimmer with moral weight, it's those hidden gems of human invention that shine brightest behind the scenes, waiting for curious eyes to unearth their legends and carry them forward into new tales yet to be told. Beneath the city's neon haze, where rain-slick streets reflect a million fractured lights, the world of Cradle 2, the grave, takes shape as a living tapestry of grit and glamour. From the dank underbelly of underground vaults to the vertiginous heights of rooftop helipads, each setting is chosen and rendered with an eye for texture and metaphor, as though every locale itself were a character in the unfolding drama. It begins in the vault, a womb of steel and cool fluorescence, whose walls bear the precise geometry of life-or-death stakes. The laser grid slashes through darkness in thin, red shafts, ribbons of potential harm dancing across the frame like visual fetters. In this controlled chaos, the cinematographer recruits a shallow depth of field that isolates Anthony Fate's silhouette against dancing lights, underscoring his single-minded focus. The vault's sterile gleam, paired with the hum of tension in the sound design, conjures a kind of sci-fi dreamscape within a crime thriller, signaling that what transpires here transcends ordinary larceny. It is an existential plea for survival. From there, we tumble into the city's fractured arteries. A chase ignites on an industrial backlot, where warehouses loomed like monolithic sentinels, their corrugated steel panels scarred by graffiti tags and rust. The production design picks up on the forgotten histories of these structures, the faint imprint of a factory logo here, the faded poster for a long-shuttered jazz club there, so that each corridor through which Fate flees feels haunted by past lives. Cinematographically, those corridors are shot with wide-angle lenses that bend perspective, turning straight lines into menacing curves. The camera lingers on puddles in the concrete floor, catching wheel reflections that blur in slow motion, while the overhead fluorescents flicker in rhythms that raise the hackles on viewers' necks. In that guttural interplay of brass tacks and fleeting beauty, the film's aesthetic thesis emerges. The spaces between law and crime are as rain-slick and treacherous as these abandoned corridors. The narrative then carries us into the underbelly of the city's social hierarchy, the strip club lair of Soleil. Here the set blossoms in contrast to the vault's minimalism and the warehouse's desolation. Velvet drapes, ultraviolet neon tubes, and polished chrome surfaces combine in a Baroque swirl, crafting a den of vice where power is bought and sold in whispered exchanges. Grainy haze from fog machines blurs the air, so that spotlights carve figures from shadow in a chiaroscuro of ambition and deceit. The production team layered this location with every tactile seduction. Mirrored pillars doubling the bodies on the dance floor, plush couches scuffed by years of clandestine deals, and the bass's low-frequency rumble woven into the soundscape, so that the entire room seems to pulse like a living organism. In these scenes, the camera employs intimate over-the-shoulder shots, darting from Su Li's steely gaze to the trembling hand of a corded henchman, ensuring that the audience remains complicit in every power play. To rescue his daughter, Fate must infiltrate a rundown public hospital, and here the filmmakers shift to a clinical abstraction. Hallways are drenched in harsh, unflattering fluorescent light that casts every bruise and bead of sweat into sharp relief. The antiseptic white walls and linoleum floors, scuffed from decades of foot traffic, become a canvas for fear. Cinematographer Darin Okada tilts the camera at disorienting angles, producing a plumb-line effect that makes each corner seem a coffin waiting to close in. The sound design subtracts ambient music entirely, amplifying instead the mechanical hiss of ventilators and the hollow clack of footsteps on tile. In this austere environment, narrative momentum hinges on sound and shadow. A door's squeal, a distant crash, the swift slide of Fate's trench coat slipping behind a nurse's station. The result is a crucible of vulnerability, where any intrusion from Su's hired guns feels like a violation of the body itself. As Fate races to save his daughter, the story scales new heights, literally, by staging a heart-pounding pursuit across rooftops. The setting here is a brutalist parking garage overlooking the city's skyline, its concrete pillars and grated floors scraped bare under a moonless sky. Practical effects unleash a wind machine powerful enough to rip tarps from girders, sending dust motes dancing in the headlights of revving motorcycles. The stunt coordinator choreographs leaps across chasms between decks, and the DP captures these in sweeping crane shots that accentuate the vertigo of empty space. In those moments of free fall, the camera switches to a helmet-mounted rig on the stunt double, immersing the viewer in the perilous Gambit. The cool gray palette of concrete contrasts with the flickering tail lights of pursuit vehicles, making every dash of red a moment of life or death. Below that perilous skyline, the narrative plunges into the subway tunnels, the city's subterranean arteries humming with the distant roar of trains. Production designers transformed disused utility tunnels into a labyrinth of graffiti-tagged walls and flickering warning lights. In these depths, the air tastes of moisture and oil, and the cinematography embraces a deep, saturated green filter that suffuses every frame with claustrophobic tension. Only the headlamps of Fate's flashlight and Agent Su's badge reel light the darkness, creating narrow cones of visibility that reveal glimpses of danger. A stray rat scuttling across tracks, the glint of a dropped cartridge case, the sheen of sweat on a pursuer's brow. The sound mix here is masterful, echoing footsteps, the distant brakes of an oncoming train, and the pressurized hiss of escape valves. Together, these elements transform the tunnels into both refuge and tomb, a place where salvation and doom share the same tracks. In the film's quieter moments, patined street corners become stages for moral reckoning. Fate pauses beneath a flickering street lamp, its bulb sputtering like a dying star, and the camera closes in on his exhausted features. This single location, a forgotten alcove beneath a fire escape, carries a lifetime of meaning. Production designers scuffed the brickwork, sprayed faux pigeon guano, and planted weeds between cracks to evoke long neglect. Cinematographer Okada then mounted a 100mm lens to compress the background, making the crumbling walls loom oversized behind Fate's solitary figure. It's in these pauses between chases that the story breathes, reminding audiences that beneath every action thriller lies the pulse of human uncertainty. In stark contrast, the film returns to bright hardness for scenes in Su Li's corporate penthouse, an ultramodern high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows framing the city's grid below. Here the surfaces gleam, marble floors polished to a mirror sheen, chrome furniture reflecting endless corridor lights, and a single, massive tableau of black diamonds cascading across a white slab. The cinematic effect is one of frozen luxury, suffocating in its perfection. The camera's Steadicam glides through this sterile palace, as though surveying trophies in a museum of vice. Every cut toward Su Li's expression, caught in a reflection, reminds us that power is as isolating as glass walls. Even the outdoors bear narrative weight in this film. When Fate seeks allies in a rundown neighborhood of single-story homes and rusted chain-link fences, the setting becomes a tapestry of community resilience. Production designers hung laundry between lampposts, repainted plywood fences in faded pastels, and planted tool-rusted lawn ornaments to suggest affection worn thin by hardship. Call sheets directed background extras to perform rhythmic routines, ball bouncing, porch sitting, bingo calling, that ground fate's flight in everyday humanity. And when Sue's men tear through these quiet streets, the disruption reverberates like sacrilege, underscoring how crime invades sanctuaries of order. Color grading reinforces these setting choices. The vault scenes are blasted in cold cyan, warehouse fights wear a desaturated sepia, the strip club's interiors flare with ultraviolet magentas and electric blues. Hospital halls bleed clinical whites, rooftops loom in smoky twilight tones, tunnels suffuse in emerald gloom, corporate suites reflect steely grays, neighborhoods glow in dusty ambers. Each constellation of hues signals emotional coordinates, orienting the viewer's response to dread, adrenaline, seduction, exposure, fear, and intimacy. Camera movement and editing rhythms also dance with setting. In the vault, slow crane moves and languid pushes build suspense. In the chase sequences, rapid whip pans and smash cuts mirror the characters' racing pulses. In the hospital, extended takes heighten immersion. On rooftops, sweeping aerial shots expand horizon lines. In tunnels, jittery handheld rigs accent terror. In the corporate lair, gliding Steadicam underscores clinical control. In neighborhoods, static wide shots evoke communal stillness. The pacing of each locale evolves the narrative mood, ensuring that setting and cinematography remain inseparable language. Sound design dovetails with these visuals. The vault score throbs with low-frequency pulses. The warehouse chase is scored by metallic clangs and revved engines. The strip club throbs with bass-heavy beats. The hospital hallways embrace near silence punctuated by beeps and breaths. The rooftop chase roars with wind and screeching tires. The tunnels echo with distant rattles. The penthouse suite hums with air-conditioning drones. The neighborhood scenes bristle with cicadas and soft chatter. Foley artists layered footsteps on concrete, gear shuffles in grime, and glove snaps in sterile zones to ensure tactile authenticity. Even the wardrobe and prop choices feed the settings. In the vault, Fate's black tactical gear absorbs light. In the warehouses, his leather trench coat flares colorless. In the strip club, he dons a white polo to blend into haze. In the hospital, he drapes a blue surgeon's mask like a soldier's scarf. On rooftops, he switches to cargo pants for mobility. In tunnels, his jacket's reflective tape catches stray lights. In the penthouse, he sports a tailored suit that reads as lost innocence. In the neighborhood, he returns to worn denim that roots him in community. Props likewise adapt. The glowing diamonds shift from props in a velvet box to scattered flecks on concrete, to falling into a sewer grate as proof of moral resurrection. Ultimately, the film's settings and cinematic elements converge into a moodscape as varied and potent as any character arc. Each locale polished or scuffed, antiseptic or squalid, vertiginous or subterranean, becomes a mirror for the protagonist's inner lives. When fate navigates broken corridors, we feel his fractured resolve. When Sue Lee surveys her crystalline lair, we sense her cold dominion. When Agent Sue treads lit corridors, we hear the echo of her moral footsteps. Camera, color, sound, design, and editing form a collaborative symphony that fills each frame with emotional resonance, ensuring that every rub of concrete, every glint of neon, and every creak of water-stained metal deepens the story's impact. In the end, Cradle to the Grave is not merely an actioner. It is a guided tour through the city's hidden chapels of tension, its altars of memory and fear. Its settings become scripture, its cinematography commentary, and its production details the footnotes that enrich the reading. And as the final credits roll, we're left not only admiring the tale, but reverently tracing the footprints it leaves in neon-lit gutters, shadowed vaults, and smoke-ringed rooftops. Reminders that in cinema, as in life, place shapes possibility and images pulse with the quiet alchemy of dreams made visible. I remember the first time I sat down to watch Cradle to the Grave, and how the chemistry between the leads instantly gripped me. The palpable tension and unspoken trust between Jet Li and DMX seemed to leap from the screen. It wasn't just the explosive action or the dizzying stunts that held me, but the undercurrent of something deeply human beneath it all. This was a film about more than diamonds and gunfire. It was a story shaped by the actors themselves, their personalities, and their own stories weaving through the frames like invisible threads. To fully appreciate that, one must delve into the lives behind the camera, the cast, their reflections in interviews, and how audiences around the world have embraced, debated, and internalized this high-octane drama. Jet Li, the film's martial arts maestro, carried a legacy that was impossible to ignore. By 2003, he was already an icon of grace and precision, his movements imbued with centuries of tradition, yet lightning-quick modernity. In interviews, he spoke not just as a fighter, but as a storyteller, one who saw action as a form of poetry. I recall a candid moment during a press junket in Los Angeles, where he explained how the choreography for his fight scenes was inspired by Taoist philosophy. Each movement, he said, must flow like water, never meeting force with force, but redirecting and transforming it. This philosophy didn't just inform his fight sequences, but shaped his approach to acting. Quiet, thoughtful, and deliberate, he told reporters that portraying Anthony Fate's struggle wasn't about showing a perfect hero, but revealing a man's vulnerabilities through the language of combat. Watching his eyes during those interviews, I sensed a humility rarely seen in Hollywood stars, a deep respect for the craft and for the stories it can tell. DMX brought a different kind of energy to the film, one born from the raw streets of New York and the grittiness of hip-hop culture. Known primarily as a rapper, his transition into acting wasn't without skeptics. Yet, from the moment he stepped on set, it was clear that he carried a fierce authenticity. In a memorable interview on a New York radio show, DMX spoke about how playing Sue's character, an undercover agent, forced him to confront parts of himself he rarely revealed. "I had to be tough, yeah," he admitted, but also scared, angry, and honest. That's what the role demanded. His delivery, half-rap, half-spoken word, brought a lyrical cadence to his lines, even in the most intense exchanges. Fans of his music saw shades of the same man behind the microphone, grappling with redemption and survival. In post-screening Q&As, DMX revealed that the film's themes of loyalty and betrayal mirrored his own life experiences, lending an emotional gravitas that elevated the story beyond action tropes. One of the film's most intriguing casting choices was Gabrielle Union as the tenacious Agent Sue, whose pursuit of justice bridges the worlds of crime and law enforcement. In interviews, Union described the role as a breakthrough, a chance to embody a character who was neither just a sidekick nor a love interest, but a fully realized woman with agency and depth. During a convention panel, she shared how working with Jet Li and DMX challenged her both physically and emotionally, pushing her beyond the boundaries of her previous roles. Her stories of late-night rehearsals, intense stunt training, and moments of camaraderie with her co-stars painted a picture of a production that valued collaboration as much as spectacle. She spoke warmly about the way the cast and crew bonded over shared meals, late-night script discussions, and spontaneous dance-offs that lightened the tension between takes. The film also featured veteran actors like Mark Dacascos, whose smooth blend of charm and menace as Sue Lee's enforcer added layers to the narrative's moral complexity. Dacascos, in an interview with a martial arts magazine, reflected on the film's balance between spectacle and storytelling. He emphasized that every fight was a conversation, every punch a sentence in a dialogue about power and survival. His enthusiasm for the role was contagious, and behind the scenes, he was known for mentoring younger cast members in the art of physical storytelling, helping to forge an ensemble that felt tight-knit and genuine. The production brought together a mosaic of talents, and the interactions among cast and crew became a story in themselves. I recall reading a behind-the-scenes report where the stunt coordinators recounted the challenge of blending Jet Li's precise, fluid techniques with DMX's raw, kinetic energy. Their solution was ingenious, choreographing fight scenes that allowed each star to play to their strengths while building tension through contrast. This interplay translated beautifully on screen. Jet Li's calm, measured strikes met with DMX's explosive, unpredictable counterattacks. Crew members described these sequences as dances, sometimes a friendly duel, sometimes a battle of wills, with rehearsals that lasted hours until every beat felt natural and electric. One particularly memorable story from the set involved a rooftop chase sequence where both Jet Li and DMX performed many of their own stunts. During a complex jump from a fire escape to a neighboring ledge, the harness rig malfunctioned. Instead of panic, the crew and actors demonstrated remarkable professionalism. Jet Li caught himself with a quick pivot, landing on his feet, and DMX improvised a roll that turned a potential fall into a gritty, realistic moment that was kept in the final cut. That incident became a symbol of the entire production's spirit, a blend of artistry, risk, and camaraderie that forged something rare in big-budget action films. Audiences around the globe responded to the film with enthusiasm that was as complex as the story itself. In the United States, urban communities embraced the film's authentic depiction of loyalty, family, and survival amidst chaos. It struck a chord with viewers who saw themselves reflected not only in the characters, but in the cityscapes that framed their struggles, streets painted with graffiti, neon-lit clubs pulsing with life, and hospitals where hope flickered in dim corridors. Fan forums buzzed with debates over favorite fight scenes and lines of dialogue, with many praising how the film's heart was as loud as its explosions. Internationally, the film found a passionate audience in Asia, where Jet Li's star power had long drawn fans eager for his blend of martial arts and storytelling. Interviews from Asian film festivals reveal how viewers connected with the film's themes of honor and sacrifice, appreciating the way it honored traditional martial arts while blending in modern urban grit. In Tokyo and Hong Kong, critics hailed the film's fight choreography as some of the best in early 2000s action cinema, and screenings often ended with standing ovations, testaments to the visceral power of well-crafted physical storytelling. Yet not all reviews were uncritical. Some film analysts pointed out that the film's narrative occasionally took backseat to spectacle, with certain plotlines feeling rushed or underdeveloped. One reviewer in Film Quarterly noted that while the father-daughter relationship added emotional depth, it sometimes felt overshadowed by the relentless pacing of the action scenes. However, even these critiques acknowledged the film's ability to blend entertainment with sincere moments of character development, a balance that many action films fail to strike. In a fascinating twist, the film's reception evolved over time. Initial box office numbers were solid but not spectacular, yet its subsequent home video release and streaming availability cultivated a cult following. Viewers revisited the film, discovering layers missed in the theater, the subtle glances between characters, the moral ambiguity threaded through seemingly straightforward action beats. This growing appreciation was reflected in online ratings and discussion groups, where fans dissected the film's deeper themes of trust, betrayal, and redemption. This evolution from a typical genre offering to a beloved classic underscores how audience engagement can transform a film's legacy. Cast interviews conducted years after the film's release offer insights into how the experience shaped their careers and lives. Jet Li often credits Cradle to the Grave as a turning point, where his desire to tell stories that merge martial arts with emotional truth crystallized. DMX, whose life was marked by struggles and triumphs off-screen, spoke of the film as a moment of artistic fulfillment, a chance to channel his raw energy into a narrative that resonated beyond music. Gabrielle Union recalls how the role expanded her horizons, challenging her to inhabit a character caught between strength and vulnerability. At conventions and fan events, these reflections become moments of connection. Fans approach the actors with stories of how the film inspired them, stories of overcoming adversity, of finding strength in community, or simply the joy of watching heroes fight not just with fists but with heart. These interactions reveal the film's ongoing emotional resonance, as each new generation discovers the story anew. Behind the scenes, the camaraderie among the cast was legendary. Production diaries recount late-night poker games, where Jet Li and DMX traded stories from their vastly different worlds, bonding over shared experiences of discipline and creativity. Gabrielle Union and Francis Yip organized impromptu dance parties between takes, lightening the intense atmosphere. Crew members remember how these moments of joy and connection infused the film with an energy that carried through to the final product. In reflecting on the film's place in cinematic history, it stands as a bridge, melding East and West, music and martial arts, raw street energy and classical discipline. The interviews and audience reviews alike celebrate this synthesis, praising its ability to speak to diverse audiences while delivering thrills that transcend language and culture. It's a testament to the power of storytelling that moves not only through action, but through empathy and shared human experience. As I think back on Cradle to the Grave, I am reminded that every film is a living conversation, a dialogue between creators, performers, and viewers. The cast reflections, the critics' analyses, and the audience's heartfelt responses form a tapestry richer than any single perspective. It's this interplay that breathes life into cinema, transforming it from flickering images on a screen to a shared journey through fear, hope, struggle, and triumph. And so, dear friends, as we close this chapter on the cast, interviews, and audience stories, I invite you to carry these reflections with you. Consider the faces behind the characters, the voices that gave them breath, and the millions of hearts that beat in time with their story. Because it is in that shared human connection, woven through cameras and scripts, through lights and applause, that film finds its truest meaning. The rain began as a whisper, soft, almost unnoticed, before it grew into a steady rhythm, tapping against the windowpane like the heartbeat of the story we've just traversed together. As I sit here reflecting on everything we've explored, the tension and tenderness, the shadows and the light, I'm struck by how this film, with all its explosions and high-speed chases, is ultimately a meditation on something far deeper. The raw human threads that bind us through loyalty, sacrifice, and redemption. We started by stepping into the vault's silent chamber, where every flicker of red laser told a story of precision and desperation. We moved through the grimy corridors and neon-lit streets, feeling the city's pulse as it pressed in on our protagonists, echoing the pressure in their hearts. We met the father whose love transcended law, the crime boss whose power was both armor and prison, and the agent caught in the impossible balance between justice and mercy. Each character unfolded like a chapter in a novel, complex, flawed, and achingly real. Our journey wasn't just through plot points, but through the very textures of the film's world. The way the sterile hospital corridors mirrored fragility, how the rooftop chase painted vertigo with every leap, and how the neon haze of a strip club told stories of power veiled in shadow. We listened to the beat of the score, felt the rhythm of fight choreography, and understood how every cinematic choice, from camera angles to color grading, crafted not just spectacle but soul. Behind the scenes, we glimpsed the human heartbeat of the production, the late-night camaraderie, the whispered stories of accidents turned miracles, the dance of artistry and risk that brought those scenes to life. We heard from the cast and crew, whose voices intertwined with ours in a shared love of storytelling, and we saw how audiences around the world embraced the film's fierce, yet tender heart. And most of all, we learned that beneath the roar of engines and the flash of gunfire, there lies a story about the choices that define us, the sacrifices we make, the loyalties we forge, and the hope that even in the darkest alleys, light can find a way. If this exploration stirred something in you, whether a memory, a question, or a new way of seeing, I invite you to journey further with us. Subscribe to Frame Shift, where each video is an invitation to look beyond the surface, to find the poetry in action, the humanity in heroes, and the wisdom in stories told through light and shadow. Like this video if it resonated with you, and share your thoughts below. What scene left the deepest mark? What character spoke to your own struggles? And what films you want us to explore next? Together, we'll keep unraveling the tapestries woven by filmmakers who dare to dream and challenge us to see anew. Until our next dive into the flickering world of cinema, keep your eyes open for the quiet truths hiding between frames, and remember, every story is waiting to be discovered, and every frame holds a world worth exploring.